Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. We are making our way through July, making our way through NFL division previews. We'll be heading to the NFC South today, looking at the Buccaneers and the Saints. But Dennis, I'm sure you're happy to be talking football as sadly your baseball season came to an end.
It was a brutal defeat yesterday. The boys went down 14-3 in the first playoff game. Cole had a good first inning pitching, and then the second inning he just fell apart. He was scheduled to go 3. He only went 2. Played a good game at catcher, hit the ball hard, but the team just was off. I think they were one of the youngest teams in the league. So I think it'll be a, something for them to build on.
Too many holiday hot dogs,
I guess.
Well, at least now we can pivot toward football. Your son getting ready for his season. We're getting ready for the NFL season. Another quiet stretch in the league. Most teams are out. Most front offices and players are on vacation, so not any big news of note so far. We will dive right into the previews, and as I mentioned, going to the NFC South, kicking things off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were a whopping 9-8 last year, but that was good enough for first in the NFC South, and they actually won a playoff game, knocking out the Eagles at home in the wild card round before losing to the Lions in the divisional round. Among their departures, wide receiver David Moore, linebackers Devin White and Shaq Barrett. Among their additions, they picked up wide receiver Sterling Shepard. Be curious to see if he makes the team or can stay healthy. They picked up Randy Gregory, pass rusher, linebacker. They picked up corner Bryce Hall. They picked up safety Jordan Whitehead in the draft. They picked up a center in Graham Barton, a pass rusher in Chris Braswell. They also grabbed wide receiver Jalen McMillan out of Washington and running back Bucky Irving out of Oregon. Last year, Baker Mayfield was QB 10. Had a really good year, threw for over 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, only 10 interceptions, looked really good, which earned him a second contract with the team after a one-year deal last year. Rashad White also looked good at running back, kind of proved he could handle the load, finished as running back 4 back there, 990 yards, 272 carries. Mike Evans, another superb season, finished as wide receiver 7. Chris Godwin missed a little bit of time, but finished as wide receiver 28. And K-Dot, the young tight end, tight end 20. Dennis, they brought everyone back. Bucky Irving probably gives them a better second back than I think they had last year. Jalen
no Chase Edmonds?
I mean, Chase Edmonds is still there, but he didn't do a lot last year. I don't really foresee him doing a lot. Last year, he had 49 carries for 176 yards, which is not great, Bob.
No.
But they also added, they have Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, and Sterling Shepard there as that next group of receivers. Russell Gage got injured last year, so didn't play for them, but is gone. Not sure that matters that much. How are you feeling for them in fantasy? Last year they had a QB1 or an RB1, a wide receiver 1. Do you think they can pull that feat off again?
Yeah, it's a narrow funnel. So Godwin, Evans, and Rashad White had 60% of the targets on that team. And so they know where their bread is buttered. I think White will continue to get volume. He's the next in line. Like he's like the next Joe Mixon with a little heavier pass usage. Not terribly efficient on the ground. What did he average? 3.6 yards per attempt.
That might have
But
been a credit to their offensive line. And you know what? I misspoke. Chris Godwin didn't miss any games last year. So
he had 130 targets, 83 catches, um, almost what almost 4 yards, 3.5 yards per catch lower than Mike Evans. So Evans had 13 TDs to Godwin's 2. But they're talking Godwin up as the Cooper Kupp in this offense. When I think about that Sean McVay offense, that Sean McVay tree, I don't know where Mike Evans fits. We haven't seen that type of receiver be super successful there, but I don't expect them to go away from using Mike Evans. 136 targets for Evans, 130 for Godwin. I think they're both going to be in that range again. I think that, 13 touchdowns for Evans is probably coming down. 2 for Godwin is probably going up. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Evans be a little less efficient on his 130-plus targets. Liam Cohen was a good offensive coordinator. He worked with Baker in Los Angeles. He had a prolific offense at Kentucky. It'll be interesting to see. I'm just nervous a little bit because Dave Canales left, and he really got the most out of Baker Mayfield. And Mayfield is going to be 29 years old. I get it. Great draft capital as a rookie, but he's bounced around. He's never quite put it together season after season after season. And he's a fun guy. He's like good Gardner Minshew, has kind of a lot of that personality stuff going on. So I don't expect a lot of variance in the numbers this year. I think they're going to keep a narrow funnel focused on Godwin and Evans and Rashad White. And so for fantasy, that's really where I'm dipping my toes.
yeah.
I like Baker. I don't think he's going to put up QB 10 numbers again. I think he'll be outside the QB 1 range, but he's going to be serviceable for Superflex.
Yeah, I have him in the QB 2 range too. I was just looking because I finished my initial pass of redraft ranking since we're going to that in not too long. I think White will continue to get a line share in the backfield, which probably makes him a really good option, especially in PPR. I still like Evans. They gave him a new contract extended, work that out. Going back and re-signing Baker, re-signing Evans was kind of like, hey, we're going to go back and do this thing. I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a little step off of the finishes they had last year. We had a lot of QB injuries, a lot of prominent kind of QBs knocked out. I like Baker more in the QB2 range too. But I think, last year at this time, we weren't sure what we were going to get. Now it's almost swung too far the other way. I've seen some pretty aggressive trades for Baker, and I've seen him taken aggressively in a couple of drafts that I've done. And I think that's, people really liked him and then kind of fell out on him when his time with the Browns soured. He's no stranger to changing offensive coordinators. I mean, that was one of the issues probably for him in Cleveland was the lack of consistency. But I still think the biggest question is their offensive line. That's what hampered Rashad White's yards per carry. That's what hampers a lot of things. They invested some draft picks and some money in trying to fix that. We'll see how far that goes. They lost some pieces on defense too, and I think arguably their division got a little bit stronger. For me, I have the Buccaneers probably around 9 or 10 wins again. I did not have them winning the division again. I have them just out of the playoffs. But how are you feeling about this version of the Buccaneers?
I think it's going to be a disappointing year for them. I actually have them with a 7-10 record in my first pass. I just feel like another change at offensive coordinator, at some point it just gets to be the lack of continuity in scheme is going to keep adding up. And they've gone through it for several years now. Baker's gone through it for several years himself with multiple teams. And I think it just ends up catching up with them. I've got them, like I said, I've got them doing well in the division at 4-2. But, I mean, let's face it, they've got the Saints and Carolina in their division, and that's fairly easy to beat up on.
Yeah, I had them 4-2 in the division also. I just had them a little better than you. I just went and looked. I specifically on my last pass had them at 9-8, ninth in the NFC.
Now, I could see that. Like, they spent a first-round pick on a center this year. They spent a second-round pick on a guard last year, a second-round pick on a tackle 2 years ago, and a first-round pick on Tristan Wirfs in 2020. And they brought Ben Bredeson over from the Giants. Now, that's a questionable one. The Giants' offensive line was bad, so I'm a little nervous there. Just sliding him into the
You're saying line. You don't go to the Giants for offensive line prowess?
Yeah. Nope, I don't. But if that line gels, Cody Mauch came in last year and there was a lot of hype about him. Everybody loved the big redheaded guy with no front teeth. And, he was the Gardner Minshew of offensive linemen. And then he kind of played bad. So I think having a year in the league, I think he's a good offensive lineman. I think he's an NFL caliber lineman. And so I expect a lot out of him this second year. I think he's worked hard in the offseason. You haven't heard anything about him, so that he's kind of a no-drama guy, but he come from a small school and was stepping up significantly. And he is versatile. So if Graham Barton plays well at center, I do think there's an opportunity for the offensive line to improve. That being said, I would expect them, if they do gel, probably I think 9-8 is their ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, that's as good as they did last year. And really, I think the year before with the last year of Brady, weren't they 8-9 and winning the division? I mean, this has not been – it's not like they've been blowing people away, even though they're the two-time winners. Right behind them last year also finished –
Before we move on, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So Mike Evans has put up 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Now, 2 of them were real close, a 1,001 yard and a 1,035 yard. Nobody has ever done that before. He's going into year 11. At least I think nobody's done that. I think 9 was the old record. He's going into year 11, another new offense, an offense that's geared towards Chris Godwin's skill set. Does Evans get 1,000-yard season number 11?
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, I'd like to see them play it out on the field. It's geared toward Chris Godwin's skill set. Reminds me of when Lombardi went to the Chargers and everything was going to run through Mike Williams, and who was there still leading the way for the Chargers? It was good old Keenan Allen. So I'll believe it when I see it. I think Mike Evans is their deep guy, and I think Baker likes to go downfield.
Now,
and
where did you
have to go downfield?
Where in your first pass of rankings? Where did you have Godwin and Evans ranked?
I had Evans at 15. I had Godwin at 41.
Okay. So you're not buying Godwin, huh?
I'm just not buying that they're gonna have two great receivers. It's also wide receivers really hard. I'll probably go back and look at. I mean, there's so many guys at wide receiver to
And that's
go.
really, and that's what they are too. A lot of them are just guys.
I don't know about that. And there's so many offenses I like better than Tampa Bay. I guess we'll see. I don't know. I leaned more heavily toward Mike Evans, but maybe I'll bring them closer together. I don't know if Evans has like that wide receiver 7 season again. That feels a little too ambitious.
Yeah. It feels like a wide receiver 2 year for him.
Not too far on the heels of the Buccaneers was the New Orleans Saints. They also finished 9-8, but second in the NFC South and out of the playoffs. Among those who left, quarterback Jameis Winston left and went to Cleveland. Wide receiver Michael Thomas left and is still a free agent. Andres Pete, the guard, is gone, and Malcolm Roach, their defensive end, is gone. They didn't add a whole lot of players on offense. They added Cedric Wilson, the wide receiver, for some depth, and they added Chase Young, a pass rusher, on the outside. In the draft, they took Talisi Fuaga, a offensive tackle. Later in the draft, they took Spencer Rattler, a quarterback who will compete probably for the number 2 slot. They took a wide receiver in Bub Means, and they got a good cornerback in Kool-Aid McKinstry. Last year, Derek Carr started all 17 games in his first year with the Saints. Finished his QB 16, little under 4,000 yards, so not great there. 25 touchdowns, not too bad, but only 8 interceptions. I think he was people didn't have an incredible impression of him, but he was a pretty solid QB2 for them. In the backfield, Alvin Kamara served a suspension to start the season, finished as running back 11. Jamal Williams struggled to stay on the field, was running back 61. And Kendre Miller, as a rookie, was a rumor, finishing as running back 70. In the passing game, wide receiver Chris Olave was their big man, wide receiver 16. Rashid Shaheed finished as wide receiver 44, made some moves out of the slot. At tight end, Taysom Hill was tight end 12, although that is incredibly deceptive, and Juwan Johnson was tight end 28. Dennis, it feels like it's all about Kamara and Olave again in 2024.
If you're buying into the Saints, you have to buy into Derek Carr. It just comes down to that. Now, I feel like Spencer Rattler is a better talent than Jake Haener. I don't know what that says about Spencer Rattler, but I think Rattler, his college career humbled him.
It says he's QB2.
I think his college career humbled him a little bit. Rattler has extremely good arm talent. If he was able to go through this year as the number 2 quarterback and virtually not play, I think it would be awesome for Spencer Rattler. I think it puts him in a situation to potentially do something next year. But that being said, this offense is going to be going through Alvin Kamara. And unfortunately, it's going to go through Taysom Hill. They just can't quit Taysom Hill. And to the point where, like, I'm looking at him in some spots and going, shit, if I can get him as a tight end and play him as a tight end, I think I might go for it in some of the teams I have. I have a little bit of hope for Kendre Miller going into his second year, but I also have some hope for Jamal Williams because he does well every other year. And, well, let's face it, 2 years ago he scored 117 touchdowns. Last year he was non-existent. So we should be back to another good year this year with Jamal Williams. I don't know. Alvin Kamara has made his hay in the passing game, and then he had a couple seasons where he kind of dropped off, and they tried to make him like a grinder back these last couple years with only 77 and 67 targets, 86, 77, and 67 over the last 3 years. And, his game isn't carrying the ball 250 times a year. His game is 175 carries and, 85 catches. Are they going to go back to that and realize what did we do? That's a great question. If Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller both play better, I think it makes it easier for them to do that. Somebody has to step up in the running portion of the offense to allow Alvin Kamara to do that. I think that the sleeper for me really is Rashid Shaheed. He was a darling in Scott Fishbowl drafts because he's such a good kick returner, and the scoring on the kick returns and punt returns is crazy for the Scott Fishbowl. And let's see, where did he end up last year? Shaheed had 75 targets in 15 games, 8 starts, 15.6 yards per reception. So he was getting down the field. Olave was no slouch at almost 13 yards a catch also. But Olave is the top dog in that offense when it comes to receiving. And then Kamara is a legitimate two-way threat. But at 28 years old, I'm starting to get nervous about Kamara. We see running backs just kind of drop off a cliff. And with Kamara's heavy carry workload over the past 3 seasons, I do have some concerns about that.
Yeah, the backfield's going to be kind of interesting. So I think, they brought in Clint Kubiak to run the offense. And Kubiak, again, goes back to Kyle, goes back to his father Gary, goes back to Mike Shanahan. A different kind of probably rushing attack than what you would think of with Alvin Kamara, which does make you wonder if Miller steps up in year 2 or if Jamal Williams, makes good on the free agent deal. One of them steps up a little bit more. But what really helped Kamara last year was we saw the receptions go way back up. And I still think he's a good receiver and is probably the second best passing option on the team behind Olave. Rashid Shaheed had some moments last year. He had some decent games, but they're it looks like they're projecting to be asking A.T. Perry to take quite a step forward, or Cedric Wilson to be out there opposite Chris Olave. For fantasy purposes, I still like Taysom Hill because he's finished top 12 in the tight end position the last, I think, something like 5 years in a row. That's not because he's such an incredible tight end, but because he's a weapon, and I think he will continue to get deployed out there. So he's an under the radar one. Olave is probably correctly priced. Kamara is probably cost-wise running a little bit higher than I would like right now because I have some questions about this. And what are we gonna get from Derek Carr if they struggle down in the season? It would make sense for them to take a look at Spencer Rattler, except for I think if this team doesn't do well and make the playoffs, there could be some sweeping changes. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being Kamara's last year, Derek Carr's last year, and Dennis Allen's last year, in which case I don't know if Dennis Allen is motivated to put a rookie out there. And I just don't think this team is going to be that great. I think they could be in the 7 to 10 win range, but I lean more in the 7 to 8 win range. I don't think they'll be way under 500, but I don't think they're a playoff team, even in the NFC.
I don't believe in them at all. I think their defense is getting old. I love Cam Jordan. I actually got to drive him for the nationwide golf tournament, and he was quite friendly. Speaking of, I'm scheduled to drive Nick Chubb on Thursday for a deal here in town too. Is it tacky if I wear my autographed Nick Chubb jersey to drive him?
No, maybe he'll talk to you this time.
Maybe. Other than McKinstry, they haven't invested a ton this year in their defense, and so they've got some unsigned, some unrestricted free agent guys that they signed to fill in their defensive line. Carl Granderson, a college free agent. It really comes down to what can Cameron Jordan give them, 12 years into his career. Tyrann Mathieu, older. That Marshawn Lattimore is still pretty good, but again, he's a 6-year guy now. They did sign Willie Gay away from Kansas City, and Demario Davis away from the Jets, but those are guys that I think may be past their prime on defense. So that means the offense is going to have to throw, and we see Derek Carr time and again melt down. He'll have some good games, but he's not a guy that we expect to put the team on his back. I only have them winning 5 games. I think that I agree with you. We've expected Dennis Allen to get shown the door for a couple years now, and I think all of the salary cap shenanigans that they have done over the last, 37 years are finally coming home to roost, I think. And at some point you've just got to clear the deck. And I think it ends up being this year.
Yeah, I just don't. I think that for too long they've done, and this is what I had accused Denver of doing too prior to this offseason. It's like you have the pieces and you're not that far away, so you don't want to. You're trying to just get a couple of parts or shift a couple of things to remain competitive and get into the playoffs, but they aren't good enough. And if you continue to just tread water in the middle, because I think Dennis Allen's been their head coach since Sean Payton left.
Yeah.
I think he was the defensive coordinator with Payton, and they were trying to hold on to that. I feel like that move to get Carr was a piece of trying to hang on to that. They've hung on to Kamara. They even hung on to Michael Thomas until this offseason when they finally decided they couldn't make it work. I actually think with another disappointing season next year might actually be time to make sweeping changes, because in the NFL you have to bottom out to come back up, but the come up can be quick. I mean, look at Houston. I think Houston is a great model. They tried to tread water for the first season after letting go of Bill O'Brien, and then Nick Caserio was like, we're just going to have to bottom out and clean house and trade our toxic assets. And then last year, they went from number 2 overall draft pick to one of the best teams in the AFC. I don't know if the Saints can make that quick of a flip. I have questioned the Saints draft choices for a couple of years. They make some curious up high picks that haven't panned out, and I think that's hurt them too. I liked their draft a little bit better this year, but I think that you're right. They're going to have to clear out a lot of these toxic assets, and it's going to be painful. But I don't see this team as being good enough, even in their own division, to make the playoffs. And just making the playoffs out of the NFC South, Tampa Bay is going to have to ask themselves some hard questions here in a little bit too. They're kind of trying to hang on to the bandwagon. A lot of it's going to depend on one of the teams that we talk about Friday, and it's not the Carolina Panthers. But
yeah, I think we've seen with the way Houston tore it down, the way Atlanta kind of tore it down, and Denver's doing it now. Eating your dead cap.
Chargers.
Yep. At some point, you just got to say, man, we're just going to eat all this cap, and we're going to come out the other side and get going. I think the Saints have hit that spot finally.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday looking at those kind of newly retooled Falcons and also a Carolina Panthers team that is trying to give their fan base a little reason for optimism. So that should be interesting. Dennis, if people have a couple of long and lonely days in between, what can they do to fill their time?
They can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search button, find the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, and hit that subscribe button. Give us a download. Don't listen, but it's cool if you do. It'd really be cooler if you did. Give us a download. Give us a listen. Give us a like, a rating, a review, all that fun stuff. Go follow us on social media at Roundtable FF on the old Twitter machine /Xbox. We'll have to figure out our other social media, see if we can get our Fantasy Football Roundtable Facebook page back at some point.
Well, that'll do it for us today. I hope you guys have a great middle of the week, and we